There is a saying among the older stars: never wake a sleeping apex predator. For 3 centuries, the Galactic Council believed humanity was a fragile, peaceful species, a race of merchants and diplomats desperate for a seat at the cosmic table. They were wrong. We weren't weak, we were in recovery. We were trying to be better. But when a negligent council strike team murdered a 7-year-old human boy over a minor trade dispute, they didn't just break a treaty, they shattered the chains we had placed upon ourselves. This is the story of the day the galaxy learned why Earth is classified as a Deathworld. Zenith Station was the crown jewel of the Galactic Council, a sprawling metallic lotus floating in the neutral zone of the Perseus Arm. It was a place of high commerce, intricate alien diplomacy, and stifling bureaucracy. To the wealthy elite of the core worlds, it was a paradise. To Thiago and Sophia Brighton, it was supposed to be a new beginning. Thiago was a senior logistics coordinator for the Terran Trade Coalition, stationed on Zenith to oversee the export of Earth's agricultural surplus. Sophia, an architect, had spent the last 2 years designing the first human-centric habitat on the station. They had brought their 7-year-old son, Lucas, a boy with a profound fascination for the myriad of alien species that walked the promenade. Lucas knew the names of a dozen alien homeworlds before he could spell his own middle name. The incident occurred on a cycle. The station, designated as High Market, the promenade, was packed. Thiago was arguing with a customs official from the Xyloran Ascendancy, a towering chitinous species that currently held the Council's security portfolio. The dispute was trivial, a mismatched tariff code on a shipment of Terran wheat. Biological contamination protocols have changed. Human, the Xyloran officer buzzed through its vocal translator, its mandibles clicking with irritation. Your cargo is seized pending a level 4 inspection. It's wheat, Thiago argued, keeping his tone carefully measured. Humanity was the newest species on the Council, and their representatives were strictly ordered to maintain a posture of total compliance. It's been irradiated, sealed, and certified by your own agricultural ministers. My son and wife are waiting for me. Can we just file the addendum? A few meters away, Sophia was holding Lucas's hand. The boy was pointing excitedly at a passing merchant from the oceanic world of Thalassa. What happened next was a cascade of tragic bureaucratic arrogance. A localized riot broke out further down the promenade, a violent clash between 2 rival mercantile guilds from the outer rims. The Xyloran security forces, trained to handle thick-skinned, heavily armored species, responded with standard crowd control protocols. They deployed a perimeter of sonic pacifiers, heavy tripod-mounted cannons designed to emit a concussive shockwave that paralyzed the nervous systems of larger, denser beings. The Brightons were caught on the wrong side of the deployment line. Wait, Thiago shouted, seeing the Xyloran troopers engaging the heavy weapons. There are non-combatant species here. Humans don't have carapace armor. The commanding officer, a Xyloran named Vale, barely glanced at him. The algorithmic protocols of Council law dictated that maintaining order superseded the safety of unarmed armored fringe species caught in an active zone. Vale signaled the activation. The shockwave hit the promenade. For a Xyloran, it felt like a heavy, exhausting pressure. For a human adult, It was agonizing, a localized rupturing of capillaries and a deafening concussion that dropped Thiago and Sophia to the deck, blood pouring from their noses and ears, but for a 7-year-old child whose bone density and organ resilience evolved in the moderate gravity of Earth, it was catastrophic. The sonic wave pulverized little Lucas's internal organs instantly when the ringing stopped and the dust settled. Thiago crawled across the polished Durasteel floor. His vision blurred with blood. He found his wife screaming, a silent, breathless sound clutching the limp, broken body of their son. Lucas's blue eyes were wide, staring at the artificial sky of the station, unseeing. The aftermath was a masterclass in bureaucratic sociopathy. The Galactic Council did not apologize. They did not launch an investigation. Instead, Counselor Vale issued a standardized form of regret, classifying Lucas Brighton's death as acceptable. Collateral Statistic 44B. A minor incident during a necessary security operation. When Ambassador Andrew Matteo, humanity's representative to the Council, demanded justice, the Council High Arbiter looked down from his podium with absolute indifference. Humanity must understand, the Arbiter stated coldly, the galaxy is a dangerous place. Our security forces cannot be expected to recalibrate their equipment for every fragile, soft-tissued species that wanders into a high-risk zone. The child's death is unfortunate, but legally, the ascendancy acted within the parameters of the Zenith Accords. Case closed. They thought that would be the end of it. They thought the humans would weep, file their grievances, and retreat to their corner of the galaxy, too weak and dependent on Council trade to do anything else. They didn't know that on Earth, Thiago Brighton was carrying a tiny mahogany casket through the pouring rain of Arlington, and they didn't know that humanity's peaceful demeanor wasn't a biological trait. It was a mask. For 72 hours following the Council's dismissal, Earth did absolutely nothing. There were no further protests, no fiery speeches on the floor of the Galactic Senate, no trade embargoes announced to the Zalorians and the rest of the Council. This was proof of human cowardice. They understand their place, Counselor Vale remarked to his aides over a cup of synthesized nectar. A fragile species easily broken. They know a single dreadnought of our fleet could turn their blue world into glass. They will mourn, and tomorrow they will return to selling us their grain. But the silence from Sector Sol wasn't the silence of submission. It was the silence of a hammer being drawn back deep beneath the Appalachian mountains, in a bunker that hadn't seen use since the chaotic unification wars of the 22nd century. President Andrew Matteo sat at the head of a massive obsidian table. He was no longer dressed in the soft silks of a diplomat. He wore the stark black uniform of the Terran Commander-in-Chief. Across from him sat Thiago and Sophia Brighton. They looked hollowed out, ghosts of the people they had been just days prior. The Council has made its ruling, President Matteo said, his voice heavy, echoing in the cavernous room. They consider the murder of your son to be a mathematical necessity of their law. They believe we are a weak, nascent species that has survived only by the grace of their treaties. Thiago stared at the table, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. They looked at my boy, Mr. President. They looked at his body and they called it a statistic. I know, Thiago Matteo replied softly. He looked up, addressing the shadows at the far end of the room. Admiral Harry. Are the locks disengaged? An older man stepped into the dim light. Admiral James Harry was a relic, while the rest of humanity had spent the last century breeding diplomats, scientists, and traders to integrate into the galactic community. Harry had been left to guard the basement. He was the warden of Earth's deepest, darkest secret. Before humanity ventured into the stars, they had almost destroyed themselves. They were a species forged in the fires of world wars, nuclear standoffs, and brutal planetary subjugation. When they discovered faster-than-light travel and realized they were not alone, the first human leaders made a terrifying calculation. If we go out there as we are, we will either conquer the galaxy or we will burn it down. So humanity hid its teeth. They locked away the horrific weapons of the unification wars. They decommissioned the dreadnoughts, putting them into deep orbit around Pluto. Cloaked in localized stealth fields, they presented themselves to the Galactic Council as a peaceful, agrarian, and scientific society. They played the role of the harmless new kid on the block. The locks are disengaged, Mr. President, Admiral Harry said, his voice like grinding stone. The Soul Fleet is awake. The fusion drives of the First, Second, and Third Armadas are spinning up. The orbital foundries around Mars have shifted from agricultural machinery to munitions. Mateo nodded slowly. He looked back at Thiago and Sophia. We tried to be part of their civilized galaxy. We accepted their rules, their insults, their condescension, all in the name of peace. But a society that accepts the murder of a child as a collateral statistic is not civilized. It is a machine. And it is time we break that machine. The president activated a global comms relay. Within seconds, a message was transmitted to every human outpost, every merchant ship, every mining colony. In the galaxy, it was a single coded phrase, code black. Return to the den. Over the next 48 hours, the Galactic Council witnessed something entirely inexplicable. Every human vessel, freighters, passenger liners, scientific surveyor ships abruptly ceased operations. Without explanation, they cut their comms, fired up their slip space drives, and vanished. Human diplomats on alien home worlds packed their bags in dead silence, boarded shuttles, and departed. What are they doing? An aide asked Counselor Vile on Zenith Station, watching the real-time tracking map as hundreds of green dots representing human ships vanished from the grid. Throwing a tantrum, Vile sneered, though a faint prickle of unease ran down his chitinous spine. They are attempting a total economic boycott. Let them starve themselves. They will come crawling back when their planetary economy collapses. But Earth wasn't boycotting. Earth was clearing the firing lines. Beyond the orbit of Pluto, the darkness of space began to warp and shimmer. The cloaking fields, maintained for over a century, powered down. Slowly, the true face of human engineering revealed itself. These were not the sleek, fragile trading vessels the aliens were used to. These were leviathans of war. Ships built not for aesthetics but for survival in a hostile universe. They were plated in meters-thick ablative armor bristling with kinetic mass. Drivers, plasma lances, and nuclear silos. At the center of the formation was the spear of Lucas Nidus, dreadnought so massive it possessed its own gravitational pull. On its bridge, Admiral Harry watched the tactical displays light up, all fleets. Report combat ready, his executive officer announced. Slip space rupture coordinates are locked on Zenith Station, gentlemen. Admiral Harry said, broadcasting to millions of personnel across the Armada. For 100 years we played the role of the sheep. We let them think we were soft. We let them think we were safe. 3 days ago their arrogance cost the life of an innocent child. Today, we remind the galaxy what a death world our actually is. Harry's eyes narrowed as he stared at the projection of Zenith Station. Initiate the jump. Let us go. Introduce them to our statistics. The Galactic Council chamber on Zenith Station was in session, debating the allocation of deep space mining rights, entirely unconcerned with the silent human territory. High Arbiter Corin and avian species from the core worlds was just striking his gavel when the station's tertiary alarms began to wail. It wasn't a standard proximity alert. It was a deep resonant klaxon that hadn't sounded since the station was built. It was the warning for a massive, unauthorized slip space rupture. Report. Counselor Vale barked, standing from his seat, his mandibles twitching. Is it a rogue asteroid, a solar flare? The station's chief sensor officer, a gelatinous being floating in an environmental tank, spoke frantically through the translators. Negative, we are detecting a spatial anomaly on the edge of the sector. It's massive. The energy readings are off the charts. It's not a single rupture, counselor. It's hundreds. Who is it? The Kalan Empire. The Vax? Neither, sir. The transponder codes, they're Terran. Laughter rippled through the council chamber. The humans. What were they going to do? Blockade the station with grain freighters? Deploy the Ascendancy fleet? Vale ordered. Confidently, warn them that unauthorized entry into restricted council space with military intent is an act of war. If they do not reverse course immediately, vaporize their lead ships outside the massive transparent steel windows of the promenade, the exact spot where Thiago and Sophia Brighton had lost their son. The void of space tore open. It wasn't a clean, silent transition like the sleek alien drives produced. The human slipspace engines tore through the fabric of reality with violent, localized gravitational shock waves. The very structure of Zenith Station groaned under the stress of the spatial displacement. When the light faded, the laughter in the council chamber died. Instantly, hanging in the void, eclipsing the distant stars, was the Sol Fleet. Thousands of jagged, brutalist warships formed an impenetrable wall of dark metal. The Xyloran Defense Fleet, previously considered the most formidable in the sector, looked like toys floating before a tidal wave. Counselor Vale stared at the screens, his primary heart skipping a beat. What are those? Humanity doesn't have ships like that. It's impossible. Sir, the sensor officer stammered, its fluid tank bubbling with panic. I am scanning their hulls. Solid neutronium-laced plating, kinetic weapons of terrifying scale. Sir, these aren't newly built. Carbon dating on the outer hulls indicates these ships have been in deep space for over a century. The realization hit the room like a physical blow. The humans hadn't built an army in 3 days. They already had one. They had always had one. A transmission forced its way through Zenith Station. Heavily encrypted firewalls, bypassing the alien security protocols in a matter of seconds. Every screen, every holovid, every personal device on the station flickered, replacing the local feed with the stern, weathered face of Admiral James Harry, Galactic Council. Harry's voice boomed over the station's public address systems, a low, predatory growl. I am Admiral Harry of the Terran United Navy. 3 planetary cycles ago, human citizen Lucas Brighton A7 was killed by Xyloran security forces under the mandate of this council. You classified his murder as an acceptable collateral statistic. The council chamber was dead silent. Even High Arbiter Corin stood paralyzed. We humans are a pragmatic people, Harry continued, his eyes cold and unblinking. We understand statistics, so we did some math of our own. We calculated the value of a human child's life against the infrastructure of your corrupt bureaucracy. Harry leaned closer to the camera. Counselor Vale, you ordered the firing of the weapons that killed that boy. You have exactly 10 minutes to surrender yourself to our custody for trial under Terran military law. If you do not, we will consider Zenith Station an active hostile military installation. And GT, you are bluffing, Vale shouted into the comms, though his voice trembled. You fire on the station, you declare war on the entire council. You will be eradicated. Harry didn't even blink. Admiral Vale demanded, do you understand the sheer mathematical improbability of your survival against the combined might of the council? And GT, Counselor Harry replied softly, chilling smile touching the corner of his lips. We are from Earth. We survived ice ages, apex predators, global plagues, and each other. We are the statistical anomaly. 10 minutes, the transmission cut. Panic erupted on Zenith Station. Alien diplomats scrambled for evacuation. Shuttles, the Xyloran Defense Fleet, frantically powered up their plasma shields and targeted the Terran dreadnoughts. And GT, fire, Vale screamed to his fleet. Commanders, show these primitives the power of the ascendancy. Fire everything. Hundreds of bright, searing plasma lances shot from the Xylosian cruisers, striking the hull of the spear of Lucas Nidas. On the council sensors, they expected to see the human ship melt into slag. Instead, the plasma dissipated harmlessly against the thick, ablative shielding of the dreadnought. The armor was designed to withstand the heat of atmospheric re-entry on gas giants and direct nuclear strikes. Alien weapons barely scorched the paint. Aboard the spear of Lucas Nidas, Admiral Harry watched the timer count down to 0. They have chosen their statistic, Harry said calmly to his weapons officer. Target the Xylosian Defense Fleet, kinetic batteries only. Let's show them what real physics looks like. Targeting locked, sir. Fire. The human ships didn't use elegant energy beams. They used mass drivers, magnetic rails, accelerating dense tungsten slugs to a fraction of the speed of light. It was brutal, primitive, and completely unstoppable by energy shields designed to deflect plasma and lasers. The first volley from the Terran fleet didn't just damage the Xylosian cruisers, it erased them. Tungsten rounds punched through the alien energy shields as if they were wet paper, slamming into the delicate, highly engineered hulls of the ascendancy ships. The kinetic transfer was so absolute that the alien vessels were instantly shattered into millions of pieces of shrapnel in less than 40 seconds. The pride of the Galactic Council's security force was reduced to a cloud of expanding debris. Not a single human ship had taken critical damage. Inside the council chamber, High Arbiter Corin collapsed into his chair, the color draining from his feathers. Councillor Vile was frozen, watching the destruction of his fleet, the realization of his catastrophic mistake finally sinking in. They hadn't policed a weak fringe species. They had kicked the cage of a monster that had spent a century desperately trying to pretend it wasn't a monster anymore. And now the cage was open. The silence that followed the destruction of the Xylaran defense fleet was heavier than the gravity of a collapsing star. On Xena Station, millions of extraterrestrial citizens, merchants, diplomats, tourists, and bureaucrats stared at the nearest viewing ports or hollow screens in absolute paralyzed horror. In less than a minute, the Terran United Navy had systematically dismantled a fleet that had maintained galactic order for 3 millennia. There were no grand monologues, no tactical repositioning, no theatrical displays of energy fields. There was only the cold, brutal application of kinetic force. The expanding cloud of metallic dust and flash-frozen coolant was all that remained of the Council's military in the Perseus arm. Aboard the Spear of Lucas Nidus, Admiral James Harry stared at the tactical hollow table, his expression unreadable. Target neutralized, Admiral reported Commander David Reynolds, the ship's tactical officer. No residual energy signatures detected from the Xylaran vessels. Xena stations. Automated defense grids are attempting to lock onto us, but their targeting algorithms cannot process our stealth bafflers. We are essentially ghosts too. They're targeting computers. Let them. Look, Harry said, his voice a low gravel. Open up a wideband channel to the station. Audio only. Let's give them their final warning. Inside the Grand Council chamber of Xena Station, High Arbiter Corum was desperately trying to restore order. Lawmakers from 100 different worlds were screaming over one another, their various translator modules creating a cacophony of panicked alien dialects. Councillor Vale of the Xylaran Ascendancy was backed against his podium, his mandibles clicking in a frantic, irregular rhythm, a biological indicator of profound shock. Suddenly, the station's ambient lighting shifted from a warm, artificial sunlight to a harsh, emergency crimson. The deafening hum of the Terran broadcast overrode everything else. Galactic Council. Admiral Harry's voice resonated through the deck plating itself. Your defensive perimeter is gone. We have isolated Zenith Station. Any vessel attempting to launch from your docking bays will be vaporized. Any automated defense battery that powers its capacitors will be neutralized. You have 5 minutes to deliver Counselor Vale to Iraq 4 on the promenade. If he is not there, we are coming inside. He can't do that, Counselor Vale shrieked, his 4 primary arms gesturing wildly toward Arbiter Coron. The Zenith Accords forbid planetary bombardment or station breaching without a formal declaration of war. It violates every statute of civilized engagement. Civilized, Coron snapped, his feathers bristling as he slammed his gavel down, cracking the marble podium. You murdered one of their children and called it a statistic, Vale. You invoked the wrath of a Deathworld. Look out the window. Do you think they care about our accords? We have to deploy the internal security garrison, Val insisted, tapping frantically on his console to summon the station's heavily armored riot police, the Xyloran ascendancy will not bow to unarmored, soft-tissued primitives. Lock down the blast doors, arm the security forces. We will repel their boarding parties and hold the civilians as hostages if necessary. They wouldn't dare risk their own people. Arbiter Corin looked at Val with a mixture of disgust and profound pity. You still do not understand, do you? You still think you are the predator. Outside, the Terran fleet shifted its formation, massive blocky vessels, designated as Kodiak-class assault carriers, detached from the main armada and began burning hard toward the station. They didn't maneuver with the graceful arcs of alien shuttles. They slammed through the void in jagged, aggressive vectors, shrugging off the station's sporadic point defense laser fire like rain bouncing off an iron roof. Admiral, the 5-minute deadline has expired, Commander Reynolds announced on the bridge of the Spear. Sensors indicate internal blast doors are sealing around the council chamber. Xyloran security forces are massing at the primary airlocks. Harry nodded. Once, deploy the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. Tell Colonel Bradley he has the green light. Execute Operation Broken Glass. From the bellies of the Kodiak carriers, hundreds of boarding torpedoes were launched to the alien observers. It looked like the humans were firing solid missiles directly into the civilian sector. Panic reached a fever pitch as the heavy armor-piercing pods slammed into the outer hull of Zenith Station. They didn't explode. Instead, the magnetic clamps engaged and thermal breaching charges melted through the station's meter-thick durasteel hull in seconds. In the promenade, a squad of 30 Xyloran security troopers, standing 7 ft tall and thick, kinetic-resistant carapace armor, leveled their plasma rifles at the hissing red-hot ring melting into the wall. They expected a firefight. They expected soft, fleshy humans to stumble through the breach, easy targets for their searing energy weapon. The heavy circular plug of the hole blew inward with a concussive blast, knocking the front row of Xylorans to the ground. Through the smoke, the humans emerged. But they were not the fragile diplomats the Council was used to. These were Terran Marines encased in Mark VII Aegis heavy power armor. They stood nearly 8 ft tall, entirely enclosed in angular, dark gray ablative plating. Their visors glowed with an ominous cold blue light. They moved with a terrifying hydraulic assisted speed that defied their massive bulk, ignoring the heavy gravity plating of the station. The Xyloran commander roared an order, and the security forces opened fire. Plasma bolts slammed into the chest plates of the leading Marines. The thermal energy simply splashed against the human armor, absorbed by the heat sinks and dissipated into the surrounding air. Contact front, growled Captain Wallace. Jennings threw his suit's external speakers, his voice heavily synthesized and terrifyingly calm. Lethal force authorized. Clear the promenade. The Marines didn't use plasma. They used standard issue magnetic acceleration carbines. The deafening crack of hypervelocity tungsten rounds echoed through the cavernous promenade. The Xyloran carapace armor, designed to absorb energy weapons and blunt force trauma, shattered like glass under the armor-piercing kinetic rounds. It wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. In less than 30 seconds, the entire Xyloran security detachment lay dead or dying. Not a single Marine had fallen. Captain Jennings stepped over the twitching body of a Xyloran enforcer, his heavy, magnetic boots crunching on the pristine white tiles of the station's commercial hub. He looked around. Thousands of alien civilians were huddled in the corners of the promenade, screaming, covering their eyes, waiting for the slaughter. Jennings raised his armored hand, gesturing for his squad to halt. He activated his external translation matrix, projecting his voice across the massive room. Terran Marines, Jennings announced, his voice booming over the cries of the crowd. We do not fire on non-combatants. Keep your heads down. Stay where you are and no one else gets hurt. We are only here for the council. The aliens watched in stunned disbelief as the towering mechanized titans of death simply walked past them, their weapons lowered, forming an impenetrable marching column toward the central spire. They didn't loot the shops, they didn't fire indiscriminately. They moved with a chilling, hyper-disciplined precision that terrified the aliens more than chaotic violence ever could. This was the twisted, terrifying reality of the human death worlder. They had mastered the art of war so completely that they could turn it on and off like a surgical laser. The blast doors leading to the council high chamber were comprised of a titanium polycarbonate alloy, 3m thick. The council architects had boasted they could withstand a direct orbital strike. To the engineers of the Terran combat divisions, it was merely an inconvenience. Inside the chamber, Counselor Val was pacing frantically, checking the security feeds. He watched, horrified, as the human boarding parties bypassed the labyrinthine security checkpoints using localized explosive charges to create their own doorways through walls, floors, and ceilings. They weren't fighting the station's layout, they were ignoring it. They are 50m away. Val screamed at the remaining royal guards, hold the line. When they breach the door, concentrate. All fire on the entrance. High Arbiter Corin sat quietly in his elevated seat, his eyes closed. You cannot hold back a tsunami with a shield, Val. It is over. A rhythmic, heavy thudding echoed from beyond the massive blast doors, the sound of magnetic boots marching in unison. Then, silence for 10 agonizing seconds. Nothing happened. Val's guards kept their weapons trained on the center of the door. Then, the hinges didn't melt, the door didn't blow inward. Instead, a series of high-frequency structural resonances vibrated through the chamber. The human sappers had attached seismic resonators to the locking mechanisms, vibrating the ultra-hard alloy at its exact shatter frequency. With a deafening groan, the massive titanium doors cracked down the middle and simply collapsed, crumbling into a pile of jagged shrapnel. The dust plumed into the pristine chamber. Through the haze stepped a dozen Terran Marines, their weapons raised and locked onto every armed guard in the room. Laser sights danced across the chests of the Xyloran defenders. Drop your weapons, a Marine ordered, his voice echoing through the silent room. One panicked Xyloran guard twitched, his finger tightening on the trigger of his plasma rifle. Before the weapon could even hum to life, 3 kinetic rounds struck him center mass, throwing him backward over the legislative benches. The rest of the guards instantly dropped, their weapons falling to their knees. Their manipulators raised in surrender. The Marines parted, creating an aisle. Through the center of the chamber, from the back of the formation, stepping over the ruined blast doors, came Admiral James Harry. He was not wearing power armor, he wore the crisp black dress uniform of the Terran Navy. His chest, adorned with ribbons from wars the galaxy didn't even know existed, he walked slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, taking in the grand, terrified assembly of the Galactic Council. He looked up at the towering ceiling, then down at the alien delegates cowering in their seats. Such a beautiful room, Harry said softly, the translation matrix carrying his voice to every ear. You make such grand, sweeping decisions in here, decisions about the lives of billions, decisions about who matters and who is merely a statistic. Harry stopped at the base of the central podium, looking directly up at High Arbiter Corrin. The avian alien swallowed hard, gripping the edges of his desk. Admiral Harry, Corrin began, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to maintain diplomatic composure. We recognize the strength of your fleet. We are prepared to offer reparations, financial compensation for the family, trade concessions, a seat on the inner circle. Harry didn't smile, he didn't blink. You misunderstand the nature of our visit, Arbiter. We didn't come here to negotiate a better trade deal. We came to rewrite the rules of your universe. Harry turned his gaze toward Counselor Val, who was shrinking back against the marble steps, his mandibles quivering. Counselor Val, Harry said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the lethal weight of absolute authority. 3 days ago you classified Lucas Brighton's death as acceptable collateral, statistic 44B. I'm here to inform you that the Terran United Government rejects your mathematics. Harry signaled to the Marines. 2 towering armored soldiers stepped forward, grabbing Val by his upper appendages. The Xylaran shrieked, struggling uselessly against the hydraulic grip of the human power armor. You have no jurisdiction, Val screamed, his voice cracking. I am a sovereign representative of the ascendancy. You cannot do this. Watch me, Harry replied coldly. He turned back to the rest of the council, projecting a holographic document from a device on his wrist. It hovered in the center of the room, glowing blood red. This is the sole doctrine, Harry announced, his voice ringing with absolute finality. As of this moment, it supersedes all Zenith Accords within 1,000 light-years of Terran space. It has one core tenet, and I suggest you all commit it to memory. The Admiral swept his gaze across the room, ensuring he had the terrified attention of every species present. If any member of the Galactic Council, its security forces, or its affiliated governments harms a human civilian, if you spill a single drop of Terran blood through malice, negligence, or bureaucratic arrogance, we will not file a grievance. We will not seek reparations. We will bring the Saw fleet to your homeworld, and we will dismantle your military infrastructure until you are thrown back to the Stone Age. We will salt your skies with orbital fire. The silence in the room was absolute. The delegates realized they weren't dealing with a civilized political body. They were dealing with a highly organized pack of apex predators who had just established the boundaries of their territory. We tried to be the gentle merchants, Harry continued, his tone softening just a fraction, hinting at the profound sorrow beneath the rage. We hid our fangs because we knew how sharp they were. We wanted to be better than our history, but you demanded the Deathworlders. So here we are. Harry turned on his heel, his dress shoes clicking sharply on the marble floor. Take him to the brig, he ordered. The Marines holding Vale. He will stand trial in Arlington, Earth, and he will face a human jury. Admiral Arbiter, Corin called out, his voice desperate. What of the ascendancy? What of our treaties? Harry paused at the ruined threshold of the doors, looking back over his shoulder. Your treaties are void. The ascendancy fleet is dust. Pray, we do not find any more errors in your paperwork, Arbiter. With that, the Terran forces withdrew. They moved with the same terrifying disciplined silence with which they had arrived. They didn't linger to gloat. They simply marched back to their drop ships, leaving the Galactic Council broken and forever changed. 6 weeks later, on a quiet, rain-slicked afternoon in Arlington, Virginia, Thiago and Sophia Brighton stood beneath a sprawling oak tree. Air was cool, the sky a bruised purple. Beneath the tree was a small headstone, carved from black marble. Lucas, Brighton, beloved son. He loved the stars. Thiago held Sophia's hand, staring down at the fresh earth. The galaxy had been turned upside down. The news networks were flooded with endless reports of the Galactic Council capitulating to Terran demands. Alien ambassadors were bending over backward, rewriting their safety protocols, terrified of inciting the wrath of the Sol fleet. The universe was suddenly violently safe for humanity. But as Thiago looked at the small grave of his 7-year-old son, the geopolitical victories meant nothing. The might of the dreadnoughts, the terror in the eyes of the alien counselors, the justice brought upon Vale, none of it could bring Lucas back. President Andrew Mateo stepped quietly through the wet grass, holding a black umbrella. He stood a respectful distance away, his head bowed. Mr. President, Thiago acknowledged softly, not looking away from the stone. And GT, Thiago. Sophia, Mateo replied, his voice heavy with grief. The trial concluded this morning. Vale was found guilty of negligent homicide and crimes against humanity. He's been sentenced to life in a maximum security black site. No parole, no extradition. Sophia pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, single tear cutting through the rain on her cheek. Does it matter? She whispered, her voice cracking. The galaxy is terrified of us now, but we still have to go home to an empty house. President Mateo stepped closer, lowering his umbrella slightly. I know, Sophia, I know it doesn't fix it. The universe is a cruel, chaotic place, and we paid the highest possible price to learn that lesson. But I promise you this. Mateo looked up, his eyes locking onto the cloudy sky, where, hidden amongst the stars, the most powerful fleet in existence stood a silent, unyielding watch. No alien bureaucrat, no council, no empire will ever look at a human child and call them a statistic again. Lucas made sure of that. His name will be the shield that protects every generation that follows. Thiago squeezed his wife's hand, taking a slow, shaky breath. The rain continued to fall, washing over the black marble. Out there in the vast, cold dark of space, the ancient predators of Earth were finally awake, and they would never, ever go back to sleep. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darker, Triumphant side of HFY. Sci-fi, hit that like button and share this story with your fellow sci-fi fans. What did you think of Admiral Harry's chilling confrontation with the Council? Let me know your favorite moment in the comments below. If you want more epic tales of humanity showing the galaxy why Earth is the ultimate death world, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. We have plenty more galactic drama, tactical warfare, and HFY stories coming your way every single week. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep your eyes on the stars.